Hi everyone, good evening. It's Trisha here from Everything Energetic for my live Q&A as part of the Connecting Soul Beings Summit. I hope you've all been enjoying the summit and getting a lot out of it. And I'd love you to ask any questions you want about me, about animal communication, whatever you want to know, any unanswered questions from my presentation, happy to answer anything. If you're here live, by all means, go ahead and put your questions in the comments box. Hi, Bianca. And if you're watching the replay, you're very welcome to add your questions then too, and I'll answer them as soon as I see them. So I wanted to share a bit more tonight about how I work and the way that I receive information as an animal communicator. I think it's a common misconception by a lot of people that animal communicators all get their information by hearing streams of conversation from the animal. So there's a full-blown conversation going on in their head with the animal that they're looking at or in the presence of. And that's not how it works for me. And since the summit presentation, I've actually had a few people say, oh, I'm so glad you said that, because it doesn't work like that for me either. So be reassured that it's different for everyone. And if you're not hearing voices in your head, not that that makes you crazy or anything, but if you're not hearing those streams of conversation, it doesn't mean that you're not doing it right, for instance. So there are a variety of ways that you might receive your information. You might hear information, whether it's streams of conversation, individual words, sentences. What I get is words, phrases, or answers to questions that I ask. You might see the information. So you might see colors. I see colors. I see energy. You might see full-blown visuals, as if you were actually there seeing the scenario that, you know, whatever happened to the animal, whether it's an accident or some experience that they had or some problem they're having. You might actually see that whole visual unfolding in front of you as if you were watching a movie. Or you might see bits of that. You might see them, and I get this a little bit, you might see them, you know, looking like they're in pain, for instance, or seeing a waggy tail, knowing that that visual means the animal, the dog, is happy. So hearing, visuals, and you might also get feelings. So you might feel temperature, hot and cold. You might feel pain. You might feel emotions, and that's mostly what I get, is emotions. And so I know by what I feel how the animal is feeling. So there's a whole variety of ways that you can be receiving information from an animal. And if you experience anything different than that, do tell me in the comments. I'm happy to have a conversation. I see there's a couple of people there. The real skill, and I said in my presentation that I believe animal communication is a practiced skill, unless you're the type of person who gets those constant streams of conversation, then it's just kind of there, I guess. But To me, it's a practiced skill. And what I mean by that is when you get information in a variety of different ways like that, then it's only by practicing that you learn what those individual things mean. And what the animal is trying to tell you, what the message is, if you like. I had one client who was seeing quite a clear visual of, as if she was looking at like a light board, where if the answer to the question she was asking was a yes, a yes would light up in big bright lights, and if it was a no would light up in big bright lights. So that was quite an obvious one, but a bit of a weird visual. You know, not everyone is going to get something like that. So you kind of learn, observe at first what you're getting regularly. You might want to take lots of notes and, you know, track what you're getting, and you'll start to learn what those individual things mean. So for me, I've been thinking about this week, because several times just in the last week or so, when the very first question I usually ask an animal in a session is, how are you? And several times lately, what I get is like a shrug. Well, that's not a whole lot of information, is it? And I just go back to the owner and say, well, I asked how he was and he shrugged. That doesn't tell them much. You know, what does that mean? Are they okay, not okay, somewhere in the middle? So for me, if you haven't figured this out by now, I really quite like statistics, and I'm a bit of a spreadsheet geek, and endlessly curious about all these, what the trends are, if you like. What are the statistics with our animals, say, in terms of how okay they are or not? Or you might have seen the other day I posted my survey about how intelligent our animals are. So because I don't get those streams of conversation, if all I get is a shrug, I need a way of figuring out what that means. And the other thing about that kind of shrug is, one thing I've learned through my sessions is that animals will occasionally lie about you know, what they're telling you. And occasionally, rarely, let's say, a little more often, they will hide stuff. If they think the owner would be upset to know a certain thing, or the owner would be angry to know a certain thing, you know, like that, they'll hide it, in my experience. So if all I get is a shrug, I need to know, are they okay or not? Are they hiding something? You know, what's going on? So I've developed my own protocol of asking more questions, and I've found a way of measuring what's actually going on. One thing about that is that there's a difference between asking the animal the question and asking their higher self the question. And you might get two different answers. So that's something to bear in mind. If I get that shrug, then more than likely I will ask to speak to the higher self and ask them, what's going on here? Are they okay or not? The higher self, as in my experience, doesn't shrug. You're more likely to get a straight answer. And I will often, because I like statistics, I'll often ask my question on a scale, you know, on a scale from 0 to 5. How okay is this animal? How happy is this animal? How much pain does this animal have? That sort of thing. Because to me, that's much clearer for the owner. They know more definitively what's going on, and it's measurable. So we can ask for those levels, if you like, at the beginning of a session, and then check again at the end of the session where I've done some healing, rebalanced their energy. Maybe I've done a bit of equine touch or some Masterson method, or, you know, I've added in some little tweaks here and there. Maybe I've cleared past life issues. Then at the end of the session, when I check those levels again, we should see that the happiness has gone way up, that the pain has gone or lowered significantly. So I really like, it's not showing me the comments for some reason. I can see that there's 3 comments, but I can't see what they are, which isn't very helpful. I'm just going to go to another page, another tab, and see if I can get those questions. So I hope that explains a bit about how I work, and oh, here we go. Good. Oh, so Shauna's there. Hi, and Kim. Hi, thank you for joining me, and Michelle. Good. If I see it saying there's more comments, I'll switch to that other screen again. So that's a bit more about how I work and why I like statistics and you know, the measurability of it, but also I keep track of all of these things, so I can go and see what the percentage of animals who had a very high pain level at the beginning of the session is, for instance. And I like just tracking, you know, what are the common themes through the sessions that I do. So I'm going to share with you a little bit about statistics I've gathered doing horse communication sessions. Because my background is with horses, about probably still 70% of the sessions that I do are with horses, and the rest are other animals. And so I've got a lot more statistics gathered up with horses. Plus, I think that we get, there's more going on with horses. Partly because they're working animals, largely. You know, we strap tack on them and we climb on their backs and we put them in closed up vehicles and take them different places and expect all sorts of things from them. That's quite different from a cat or a dog. So they're working animals, and their health tends to be more complicated, you have to be more careful with a horse's health, is the way I would describe it. You know, they get all kinds of hoof issues, all kinds of digestive issues, where horses can't throw up, basically, which means if they get some kind of blockage, it can be really serious. And then you might have issues with saddles not fitting and all those sorts of things. So there's a lot more, there are a lot more statistics ready to be gathered, which I really like. So I'm just going to share a few of my stats with you. On the subject of reincarnation for horses, in my experience, of 412 horses that I've asked what incarnation they're on, the average number of horse incarnations that any one horse has had is 46. 46 lifetimes as a horse. And the highest number of incarnations that any one horse has had out of those 412 is 120. 120 lifetimes as a horse. That's kind of mind-blowing, I think. That's a lot of experience in a variety of different ways. I find that sort of stuff really fascinating. I like to ask them those sorts of questions, and some of that stuff I don't necessarily share in my reports back to the owner, unless I know they're really interested and into that kind of thing. But your average owner, I wouldn't jump right in and tell them what incarnation their horse is on. But I track it all because I like it. Then the other thing I do is, if you saw the surveys that I shared, is every now and then a question that I really want to ask will pop into my head, and I'll think, oh yeah, okay, how can I get quick bulk information to answer that question? So for instance, last week I suddenly thought about how intelligent animals are, because, and if you read the blog already, you know this part, one of my dogs is a rescue. Her name is Pippa. She's about 10. I've had her for coming up for 2 years. And she's the loveliest dog. She is sweet, gentle, loving. She's obedient, sweet, sweet dog. But she just seems a little bit dim sometimes. I know that's an awful thing to say, but there are some things that she just doesn't seem to pick up on. Now, it could go back to whatever happened to her before we got her. That's a possibility. But it just got me thinking about intelligence. So what I do when I want bulk information to answer a question like that is I use my really fancy pendulum. It's very big. And don't be blown away now. This is my really fancy chart that I used for this one. Excuse the scribbles at the top. But basically it's 0 to 5. And so for that survey, I used my pendulum over that chart. I had my email subscribers primarily send me a photo of their pet and its name. I make an energetic connection with it, and then I use my pendulum over the chart and ask, how intelligent is so-and-so? And it would go to, nobody went to 0, you'll be pleased to hear, 1 to 5. I tracked it all in my Excel spreadsheet, and then I worked out the averages for each species. So the average for each species at each level of intelligence, 1 to 5, and the average overall 1 to 5 for each level. So I got percentages for overall intelligence and percentages for each species. I did 143 animals. I've done a few more since then, and they were about a third cats, dogs, and horses. And I thought the results were really interesting, and you can find the link to that. You'll find that blog if you scroll through the page. I shared that, might just have been yesterday. So because I'm endlessly curious about these things, I find that kind of a cool thing to do, bearing in mind that it's quite a general question to ask, and it's at that particular moment in time, and there are many factors that could be affecting it or changing it. But if you take it just at kind of an interesting face value, then the stats are kind of cool, I think. So you can have a read of that if you want to know which of those 3 species was most intelligent. Okay, so don't have any questions. Oh, hang on. There are some more comments. Kim says horses are more at our mercy. Yeah, exactly, Kim. We do so much to them and expect so much of them. So yeah, I reckon it's harder for them. A lot of servitude, she says. Exactly. I mean, all those lives, right? It's really interesting and mind-blowing. I agree. So if you have any questions, pop them in now. Otherwise, I'm probably done. I'm happy to answer any questions. I hope you found that interesting and useful. Keep practicing yourselves, you guys, and bear in mind that you can get your information all kinds of different ways, and really you just need to figure out how to interpret it, and that just takes practice. So shout if I can help you at all, and keep connecting with your animals, and I will see you again soon.